This is Propulsion, the podcast where we dive deep into the nitty-gritty of taking your business and your practice to the next level. Whether you are an entrepreneur, a franchisee, or a financial planning pro, you are in the right place. We're talking the latest tech, best practices, and expert insights, all while keeping it real and entertaining. So grab a coffee, sit back, and let's get ready to blast off. I'm your host, Francois du Toit. So this, that, and the other. So where did this come from? Well, as I was preparing for today's episode, and I was thinking, what is really topical at the moment? I think there's so many things, and there's two sides to it, right? There's a what is topical for me as Francois in the profession at the moment, things that might be bugging me, things that I'm really excited about, in anything in between. And then obviously the things that I see and hear people talk about and conversations that I have with people as well. So there's a couple of things that we want to touch on. And just to give you a brief idea, I want to talk a little bit about leveling up your virtual meeting setups. It's the one thing that annoys the living daylights out of me. I'll talk about that in a minute. Then also the importance of titles in the financial advisory profession or industry or whatever you want to call it. And then a very important one as well, the difference between marketing and prospecting. I often get people asking me about how do I market my financial services business or my practice? How do I market? So, but there's also sometimes I think a confusion between that and prospecting. So I want to talk a little bit about that. Then I'm going to talk about the next generation of financial planners just briefly, and then also the power of community, which is an important part for me because a lot of the things can be addressed through that as well. Right, so let's get started and talk about your virtual meeting setup. Now, this is something that's incredible to me. Let me say this, that I know that it takes money to invest into these things, and it's not that everybody can have a major setup with which you can take over the world, which I completely understand. But there are very small things that you can do that's going to cost you, if you do all of it, less than 5,000 Rand in order to get a proper setup that looks great, that sounds great, and that's an enjoyable experience for the person on the other end of the screen. Because the one thing that we never think about is like, what is the experience on the other end of the screen? And I often think about, because here's the thing why it annoys me is that I often get to talk to people that work for big corporates, and you look at their setups. I'm not talking about normal meetings and things. I talk about I interview them for other things, for other shows and for other podcasts and for other productions and things that we do for others. And then these people, you see them everywhere, but yet they still only using the built-in features of their laptop, the built-in audio, the built-in camera. They sit in different places. It's really the sound isn't great. None of those things are great. And my big question is, why are the corporates not investing into proper virtual setups for people that represent their brand? It goes beyond what I can really imagine or understand rather. For me, that should be that's part of the brand. This is not like you're joining a meeting and we're having a meeting about what's our next strategy and what do we want to do, etc. This is somebody out there being a thought leader, sharing important information and views and opinions, but it doesn't look great. It doesn't sound great. Often the background and the person is one because everything's white or that. So it's really not a great thing that I've seen before. But also then the other thing that made me think about is what is your client's experience? Because it's not about, what your experience is with your client. It's about their experience with you when they are watching you on a screen and you're not meeting with them in person. And the other thing is that none of these people from the corporates will show up to an in-person event, not looking the part, not being well prepared. And also the amazing thing is that corporates, when they do put on an event, it's the whole show. It's lights and it's banners and it's colors and it's just, everything's just amazing. But yet when we do it virtually, suddenly, let's just use the built-in stuff. And that for me is really something that we need to take note of. It is important also just in your business, for your experience with your client. What that does to their experience and how long you could actually have a conversation with somebody virtually, and also think about it, if you travel a lot, what is your setup? I was watching a thing the other day that I did while I was traveling, and that's sort of the bare minimum setup you need in any event that gives you a great experience. Anyways, I don't want to waffle on about this, but it is quite important. So the first thing is just get an external webcam. In certain instances, if you use certain types of laptops, they have built-in 1080p cameras already, and the camera is quite good. The problem with that, though, is that often, like this, for example, if I had to look at my camera on my laptop, this is what you will be seeing because of where I'm seated, and because the laptop screen is always lower than what you are. So you have to either lift the laptop or do things like that in order to get eye level. But whereas if you've got an external camera, you can put it on a tripod or on a stand or something, or at the top of another screen that you may have, and you can just sit up straight and just have a look at that. So it's just a much better experience. But it's about the quality. It's about how clear it is. There is a massive difference between your built-in camera and an external camera, right? So just think about those things. The other big thing that I'll talk about, and not obviously audio and lights and all of those things are important, but probably the one thing that is more important for me is your background. I'm not a big fan of virtual backgrounds. Not saying don't use them, but if you want to use them, make sure that you either using a green screen or you are very well the lights must be great for the virtual background to really work properly, because there's nothing more annoying than the top of somebody's head going away, or when they're waving, you suddenly see, oh, there's some stuff in the background, So those are the kinds of things. It's great to have your virtual background and have all of the things and, like your logo and all that good stuff. But ultimately, I think a proper background in your environment where you do your meetings or your presentations or your talks is actually more useful. Anyway, so I'm going to step off of that, because that I guess you get my drift and why this is important. But just think about those kind of things. You can literally get a proper mic, a proper webcam that's 1080p, and you can sort out your background for quite cheaply. I'm pretty sure you can do that under 5,000 Rand. Maybe if you invest more, you can definitely have a fantastic setup under 10 grand without breaking the bank. So yeah, just my thoughts on that. Then the second one is the importance of titles in the financial advisory industry and profession. Well, this is something that's also been close to my heart for a very, very long time. There was the categorization paper that went nowhere with RDR, and it was actually ridiculous in my humble opinion. Again, around the types of advisors that want to, like product supplier, agent, and like all these weird and wonderful things, right? My question is always like, what is in the mind of the client? What is it that the client understands? Or what is it that makes sense to them? That's really the thing that is more important. And ultimately, I was asking somebody the other day, like, do you think a client knows the difference between a financial advisor and a financial planner, or even a broker for that matter? Is it all the same to them? Because it doesn't help us changing names and having titles unless they know and understand, and it's very clear in their mind what the difference is. The one thing I also learned recently is that, talking about financial advice and financial planning in the UK means a little bit something different to what it means to us here in South Africa, which is also quite interesting to me. It's a small difference, but still there's a bit of a different view around it. So those are the kinds of things that I think when we start thinking about titles, and then obviously there's the fourth part of it, where some of us come up with our own like proprietary titles for ourselves, right? And some people go as far as to register them as trademarks or so forth. And that's fantastic. But again, then you do marketing around that to make sure that your target market knows and understands what that stands for and what that means. Then we have things like I'm a CFP professional on top of these things, or I'm an FSA, or I'm it's like all these designations. And again, do the client really know what this is? Now, I don't have answers for this here, but what I can tell you is that we're putting together a big panel discussion around this specific topic. So if you're interested in that, and if it's something that you'll attend, it's going to be virtual with some fantastic people on that panel. Just maybe in the comments, just say yes, please, or just write panel. I'll know then what that is. But it's really an interesting thing, because I do think that the big impact around titles is it's the perception and the trust. Cobus was talking about the importance of building trust with clients, and it is the foundation of everything. But there's different points in the journey where we build trust, and what we call ourselves can definitely impact trust, I think, on the one hand, and then also on the other hand, it can definitely impact the perception that people have of us. If you think about doctors, and again, I do not want to compare us to doctors because I think they've got a long way to go, actually, most of them. So when we talk about doctors, it's very clear, like they're a doctor. So we know a doctor is somebody that can make me healthy. And then within being a doctor, there's somebody that can help fix my knee. There's somebody that can help fix my back. There's somebody that can help fix, other things. So that's the sort of clear thing that they've done well in people's minds, that people know what a urologist is. Okay. People know all of these kinds of things, but in our world, do they know what a financial advisor is? Do they know what a financial planner is? Do they know? So I think that's where we've got a lot of work to do. And it starts with our own practices and what we do inside with our own clients, and how we educate our clients about what we do and what the difference is from people that do other things. Not to say that I'm better than the person next door, because ultimately every business has a specific client that they serve, and that client has a need which they are very happy with to work with that particular business. So somebody that offers a specific value proposition, and we do something completely different, those things, it doesn't mean that the one is better than the other, right? It's just a distinction. And are we clear so that people are able to make a decision around what is it that they actually need and want from us, and which one of those two businesses will probably serve their needs the best? Doesn't mean that your way is better. Doesn't mean that it's worse. So that's important. So anyway, I just think this is really an important topic, and something I wanted to leave with you, just to think about, what we call ourselves and what does it mean, and are we educating our clients on what it is that we do and what we don't do as a financial advisor, as a financial planner, or as a broker, for example. There's other things as well. Then our third topic is around marketing versus prospecting. And I think this is really something that is confusing to a lot of people. And again, like many things in the profession, we talk about things interchangeably. When we say marketing, but we mean prospecting, or we talk about prospecting, but we mean marketing, because we're not clear on exactly what the difference is, and sort of what that entails. But if I can sort of highlight this, or let me say, not highlight this, but maybe define this in sort of a simple way. Marketing is all about a one-to-many strategy. It's about creating awareness. It's about building brand. It's about building a relationship and familiarity, and making sure that people know what it is that you do and who you do it for. So that's a message that is sent out broadly, but maybe to a specific type of person. So if I say broadly, it means let's just say that you have an ideal client that you would really want to work with, or maybe you just work with engineers, you just work with accountants, you just work with whoever, business owners and things like that. Then you may just talk to that. But in that segment, you go very, very broad. So you want to reach all the business owners, for example. Or you may say, I only work with small business owners, or I only work with large businesses, or whatever that may be. But then you target all of them with your communications. So that's really what marketing is. It's really to make sure that there's an awareness and people know about you, what it is you do, and who you do it for. That's really the purpose of marketing. Prospecting, on the other hand, is actually going out and identifying specific clients and contacting those specific clients. So marketing is more of a, let me attract people to me. It's more like a magnet. I want the right people to come to me. And if I do my marketing well, it will be like a filter, and we attract people to ourselves. Where prospecting is that we are in the driving seat, and we go out and we go and identify people, and we contact those people, we have a conversation with those people, but it's very much a one-to-one approach in that sense. So when you go one-to-many, you're throwing out lines and see which one bites. That's sort of bringing people in, and then sort of the conversation starts from there. So marketing is more attracting people to you. Prospecting is more going out and finding people, and not let sort of just the river flows at its own time. What is really important for me as well when it comes to marketing is that marketing is a long game. It's really something that takes a long time. So you're not going to market today and tomorrow have a client. Not that it's not possible. You might just find somebody at the right time looking for the thing that you're offering at exactly that point in time, and they might, yeah, there's me. But typically in our world, people first want to see if they can trust you, if you are credible, and whether you care more about them than yourself. So that's sort of the things that they might be looking for before taking the step. So that's why it's a long game. It's a lot of content creation and webinars and events and things like that. Then on the other hand, you have prospecting, which is a short-term game. So prospecting is more like, look, we've got to earn revenue now. We need clients now. We can't wait for somebody to read my article 3 years from now and then have a realization that they want to speak to me. We have to earn revenue today. So you basically need both of these things. But there might be times where you prospect more, and there might be times when you prospect less. There might be, in my opinion, a business should always be marketing. You never, ever stop marketing. Doesn't matter how big you get, where you get, because it's that concept about out of sight, out of mind. And at the very least, maybe you don't market outside to attract new clients, because maybe you're in a point of in your business where you don't want more clients, but you definitely want to keep marketing to your existing clients. That's the beauty, right? So marketing never ever stops. Prospecting depends on capacity and sort of where you are, etc. So typically, as you build your business, if I talk about the financial advisor curve and the practice curve as well, or the business maturity curve, if as you grow the revenue in the business and as it's more and more of a recurring nature and it's more predictable, etc., you will do less prospecting. You don't need to do as much prospecting because you've already done that. You've already built the business. But marketing, you've got to stay top of mind. You've got to make sure your existing clients know what you're up to, that you're still there, that you're looking at things. So that's a very important one as well. So hopefully that helps. I've spoken in a few of the episodes this season around some strategies and things that you can follow. So you can find that on the channel as well. Then the fourth one is the next generation of financial planners. This is something that's very close to my heart. I wish I had more time to just sort of think about solutions in this space, or at least talk about this a lot more. But there's nothing that hurts me as much as, this is very simple. Right? So I equate it to the same thing here. If I walk in a mall and you have this small shop that was there, and then suddenly just one day you walk past and they closed. Then I always go and that's sometimes, especially if it's within a year from opening, that's somebody that had a dream and a vision for themselves, and they had a passion for what it is that they do. And they thought, I'm going to make this work. They maybe went out and borrowed money to do this. Maybe they had their own money. That doesn't really matter. The fact of the matter is the money is gone because this thing did not work. And there's nothing as heartbreaking for me as that. Now, that same feeling I get when I think about the next generation of financial planners going through all of the motions to do NQF 5, 6, 7, and 8. And trust me, I train those people. I know how much they go through. So it's really a long, long, long journey. And then we get there, and then it doesn't work out because the support is not what they need. Maybe it's a misalignment of expectations. I mean, there's many, many reasons. Often I think it was he or she just wasn't cut out for this business. It's not true. If we think about where we are, right, we're really in a fortunate place where we have been around for a long time. We've built businesses that has clients, of which we don't want to let go, by the way. So we've built these businesses. We the most technologies that's ever existed is part of our businesses, or it's available to us. We know how to find clients. We've built relationships. We know how to. Most of you, if I ask you, what is your top prospecting tool, you'll say, I don't prospect. I only get referrals. That's hard work that you put in. It's hard work that is paying off dividends for you, where people are referring other clients to you, which is the place to get to. But yet, when new people start in this business and they're 25 or 30 or whatever their age is, we expect them to go and find new clients themselves in a world where cold calling is dead. I'm not saying it doesn't work, but it doesn't work the way it used to work 10 years ago, 15, 20 years ago. People were happy to get a phone call. Today, we use Truecaller to say, no, thank you very much. And if I don't know the number, and if it starts with an 87, I don't answer. So those are the kinds of things that we need to think about when we bring new people into the business. If you look at the things that they're really looking for, is that they're looking for support. They're looking for mentorship. They want to know how, because the one thing, they may have all the technical knowledge. They may be up to date with everything that's gone, because they've just finished, and trust me, they've gone through a process of passing their PCE to get to CFP. That's a process. They have knowledge. What they don't always have is how do I talk to other people? How do I now relay this information to someone? So they have the knowledge, they can apply it in practice, but how do I communicate this? What do I say? What don't I say? How do I get to learn more about a client? What should I be focusing on? What should I not be focusing on? Do I want to be a paraplanner, or do I want to be an advisor? Do I want something else? And those are the things that are really missing from this point. And I think it's really important that we also understand that. Now, I believe any business's job is to market and prospect. It's not the individual's business, right? So if you're bringing somebody new into your business for succession or for whatever reason, just think about, how can you feed them with clients? So yes, there's a portion of your clients that you can just hand to them to start looking after. Or what are you doing from a business point of view to keep marketing and to keep prospecting so that you can feed them clients that they can then see? Do you have a set program and a set sort of process that you take new people through? Even if it's just that one, even if it's your only and first financial advisor that you want to appoint in your business, what is your plan to take them through to get to in a 3 to 5 year window? That's so important. But what do? We say, welcome here. Fantastic. This is the most amazing profession, but go find your own way. I don't know how that's ever going to work. So education can only take you so far. We really need to take their hands. I had this conversation with someone where she said 17 of the people, there were a group of 17 that studied together, that passed their CFP and their PCE, so the postgrad and their PCE. Only 3 of them are still in practice. I mean, what a waste. What a loss. It's really, really sad. So we need to do more from this point of view, and happy to have more conversations around this. My last point for this morning is around the power of community. Now, there's really 3 ways that we can do anything. And I did a poll quite a while back, maybe a year and a half or maybe even 2 years ago on LinkedIn. And I just asked, if you have a problem in your business, what do you do? Do you go and learn how to do it yourself? Do you outsource it? What do you do? Right. And one of the things that we learned is that a lot of people want to do it themselves. And again, one thing that I've learned in my business is that maybe you're interested to learn how that works, but should you? That's not your primary job. That's not your primary function. If you want to implement automation in your business, as a simple example, some of you are very inclined to go and learn how to do that, like I did. Like I learned how to incorporate and build these automations. But is that my job? Is that my role? No, it's not. That is somebody who loves that and breathes and lives that. That is what they should be doing, and we should be giving it to them. So there's the do-it-yourself part. Then there's the do-it-for-me part. But what we're seeing because a lot of times on the do-it-yourself part, even the do-it-for-me part, is that we somewhere lose steam along the way, or we get distracted with something else and want to do other stuff. So very important that the one thing that is really working well is doing it with others. There's something when there's accountability added to this, or we're in a group going through something together. That's why people form study groups, right? So I'm not on my own. I go through this together. We had some PCE prep sessions the last 2 weeks for the next sitting, which is in about 2 weeks' time or something. And those people came to these sessions together. They are there together because together you can achieve more. And that's, for me, is the power of community. Now, think about, that's basically what propulsion is. But think about this from your client's point of view. So do you have these individual clients, like 400 or 300 or 1,000 or whatever of them? Or what are you going to do to evolve this into a community? And the difference is where they do life together. They do business together. They get to know each other. And it's much more than just, I am Francois' client. becomes a whole different ball game once you start transforming, if you will, your practice from a client base into a community. So this for me is really, really important from an advisor point of view. I've asked this question. I've spoken about this at the Global Financial Planning Conference 3 years ago. I don't think people are paying attention yet, but this is really something that's very important from a financial advice planning practice point of view or business point of view. Is how do you create a community? And if you're a very large business, how do you create communities within that for different types of clients? Very, very important to just think about those things as well. Ladies and gents, so the one thing that I did not mention earlier on in the announcements is that we are taking our mid-season break. So every year in the beginning of July, we take 2 weeks break from the show. So there won't be a show for the next 2 weeks. We will be back, however, on the 23rd of July, if my memory serves me right. So for the next 2 weeks, there's not going to be a show. We might put out something that so that you don't just go cold turkey from not having a show. But be that as it may, we will be back then in 2 weeks' time. And until then, and I have a special guest back then, which we at that time, which we will announce. Anyway, you see why I need a break. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Have a fantastic weekend. Stay safe, be blessed and prosper, and continue to raise the bar. All right, folks, that's the wrap for this episode of Propulsion. I hope you got as much out of this as I did.